Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Christmas Sew Along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com. 'Tis the season. Well, not yet, but us quilters know that we need to start our quilting projects early. So Pat has set aside this few weeks to get the Heaven and Nature Sing quilt done from the Christmas Quilting book with Wendy Sheppard. So hopefully you've got your book because you will need that book in order to be able to follow along with these tutorials. I just made the wall hanging that you see in the back behind me here, and for that we only needed 4 blocks. What I've done is in the description below, I've created a little sheet that just gives you the number of each piece that you need to make the 4-block wall hanging. I can't give you any of the measurements because it's not my pattern, and you need to have the book in order to be able to do this sew along. So that document just gives you the number of pieces that you need to cut in order to just do the 4-block wall hanging. The full quilt has 12 blocks in it, and you would cut that as per the directions in the book. So, without much further ado, grab your fabric, grab your pattern, come with me, and I'll show you how I do it. Alrighty, folks, no idea what I was doing in the start of this little bit that I'm fast forwarding through. I filmed this not long after the book came out and it arrived. So it just looks like I'm laying everything out that we needed from the pattern, and I photocopied the pages so that I could scroll all over them. So there we are with everything cut out, and now I'm only making a wall hanging in this video, and I have created a document telling you the numbers of pieces that you need to do the wall hanging, but I haven't given you any of the measurements because you need the book for that. So from this point onwards, I am actually going to put this together in the same way that the pattern lists everything. So what I'm doing now is just getting all of the pieces that I need to do that. So we're going to start by putting the tree together, and for that we start at the top, and we need our B rectangle and 2 of our various A squares, so in different colors. We are making 4 of these for the whole quilt, but in this video I am only going to go through the process of making 1 of these, then you repeat that to make the other 3, etc. So we take our B rectangle and 4 of our A squares and mix it all up so that they're not quite the same. And we are going to create a little flying geese unit with our B rectangle by placing an A square on one side and either drawing a line and sewing just to the right of that line, checking that it's square, trimming off the back 2 layers and pressing it into place. But as you may or may not know, I love my folded corner clipper tool, so I'm just going to line that up here, slice off my excess first, take that to the machine and sew my 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to do that on each of the pieces for the tree and take all of them to the sewing machine at once. So the next piece that we need to grab is our D square and our C rectangles. And we're going to repeat that same process by placing the C rectangle on the side, trimming it off ready, and making an elongated flying geese unit out of our D rectangle. We'll do the same for the F rectangle with the E rectangles. And then I'll take all 3 of those to the sewing machine and sew them all at the same time. Once again, make sure that you're mixing up all your prints so that you're not getting any duplicates next to each other and that you've got a nice mix of fabrics. It would be easier if you were doing all 12 blocks for the whole quilt, but we're only doing 4 blocks for this wall hanging, and as such I chose a limited number of prints, but I think I do okay. Alright, so we'll get all of these rectangles ready, we'll take them to the machine and stitch our 1/4 inch, and then we will move on to making the base of the tree. Now that we've put the sew and flip on one side of all of our tree rectangles, we now just need to press these out towards the color or the darker of the two fabrics before placing our sew and flip on the other side of each of these. So for that, we'll go back to our top part of our tree and put an A square on the other side of that. Then we'll use a C rectangle for our next piece and a E rectangle for the last part of the tree. You saw how I had it laid out to begin with, and I've kept those pieces there where they need to go just so that I can keep a track. So when we did the sew and flip on the right hand side, we put the piece of fabric horizontally on the table in front of us, so the long side towards your tummy. And to get the right angle for the other side, I like to put the pieces vertically on the table and use my folded corner clipper tool to just trim those off before we go sew. Don't do what I'm doing here and putting the top piece on incorrectly. It needs to be out at a right angle to the piece that's underneath it, and I make that realization after I've made the cut and I find another piece because I had a stack of them to the side. There we go. Yeah, get rid of that. Try again. So we'll now repeat all of those same steps and put our sew and flip on the left hand side of our blocks by placing our piece vertically on the table in front of us. We'll then move on to making the last row of the tree, and then we'll talk about joining them all together and our tree section will be done. Now that we have our sew and flip on the left hand side of each of these pieces, we'll once again just press them out towards the darker of the two fabrics before laying them back out where they need to go. I'm now going to put the bottom row together, which requires us to grab 2 of our A squares, 2 of our G rectangles, and 1 of our H rectangles, remembering I'm just making the one block in this video tutorial. I'll then sew that bottom row together with the A, G and H over at the machine. I'll then attach the ones either side of the A block, and I'll sew the 4 rows of our tree together as it goes. So starting from the top down to the bottom, all the while pressing towards the more solid of the 2 fabrics. And let's see how I press them once I've joined the rows together. I can't remember right now. Let's go. Okay, so it looks like I pressed everything up towards the top of the block, and yep, looking at the back there, that's exactly what I did. Now in the pattern it does tell you to press them in the opposite direction down towards the bottom of the block. I can't remember if my pressing causes an issue later on, but I guess we'll see. So now that our tree unit is done, I'm just giving that a final press and we'll move on to making our star points. Now these are interesting, as you would have been aware from cutting, as you have little eye triangles, and we're making basically a half square triangle unit, but it's made up of one side of our half square triangle is made of 2 eye triangles and an A square, and then we're joining that to the J half square triangles that we cut at the beginning. Just pay attention throughout this part as we will be working with bias seams, but if you go slow and careful, you won't have any major problems. If you are worried about the bias stretching, you could starch your fabrics to begin with, but as long as you sew carefully and you are aware that it's a bias edge, you shouldn't have any trouble. Just trust the feed dogs and just ensure that you don't stretch the fabrics as you're sewing them through. So we're going to lay our little squares out as per the pattern. So we'll start with our A square, and then we'll have a I triangle. And once again, you'll see all throughout this that I'm just trying to work out which fabrics I can use. So pay attention to the pattern for the orientation of your I triangles. We'll then sew one of these on to each of our squares, and then we'll press that before sewing the other side on. No, Kendall, get it right. There you go, that's how it is. Now with this one, you will have one straight of grain piece on your square, so put that part on the top, and then your bias edges from the I triangles will actually be on the bottom close to your feed dogs, and that will help with the bias in this instance. We'll need to make a total of 8 of these units, so we'll begin just by putting the I triangle on the one side, making sure we've got the right orientation, and attaching our I triangles on the other side as well, and we'll give that all a press before joining them together with our large J triangles. You would have seen there that after I pressed the first one on, before attaching the second I triangle, I trimmed away that little dog ear, and it just makes it easier for it to go through my 1/4 inch foot on the machine. Now that we've attached the I triangles on either side of our A square, we now need to complete this half square triangle unit by attaching a J triangle. Once again, trimming off that little dog ear so it's out of the way. So we'll just put this together and lay our J triangle over the top of this, and the measurements of the pattern make this like an exact size, so there's no room to trim down. So take real care when sewing these and avoid stretching this bias seam. This seam is biased the whole way across. Once we've got this stitched on, I think I press towards the J triangle. Yes, because it is the most solid piece of fabric, so it is the path of least resistance. So we'll give that a press, and now we just need to make 7 more of these, and then we can move on to our next step. So I'll fast forward through all of that while I make the remaining 7. And as I said, because it is an exact measurement, just trim off these last 2 dog ears as well. And we'll move on to make 7 more of these as required for the block. Well, that was a wild ride. We just need to now clip all of these apart, press them all towards our J triangle, trim off all our dog ears, and then we'll be ready to lay the block out and stitch it together. With all of that now done, refer back to your pattern for the layout of these blocks, and you'll notice as I go through here that I'm just trying to mix up my colours and not have greens together, not have the reds together as best I can with the pieces that I have. We'll also bring in our remaining K squares that were cut earlier to do the corners for this block. I'm going to start by sewing the half square triangle units together in pairs of 2, and then the block will go together as a 9-patch construction. As all of our half square triangles units are pressed towards the J square, I do believe I use my little snip technique on the end of one of them, which I believe I'm doing off camera now, so that I can move the seam allowance in the other direction and it will nest as I'm showing you here. So we'll sew all of those half square triangle units together first, and then we'll be ready to do a 9-patch construction even. With all of those half square triangle units sewn together now, and they resemble a flying geese unit, we're just going to press each of those seams open before laying it back out as per the pattern, and we can commence 9-patch construction. When constructing a 9-patch, we first start by doing all of our vertical seams and then our horizontal seams. For the top and bottom row, I believe I pressed out towards the corners, and let's see what I do on that middle row. Okay, so going through that section, it looked like I pressed towards the center square, and that makes sense. With your top and bottom rows pressed out towards the corner, pressing it in towards the center on that middle row will allow us to nest those seams when we go to do the horizontal one. I've also flipped a few of the seams around just so that I can get a really nice nest on all of those intersections and everything lines up nice and square. I'll give this a final press now, and then we can pin on the top and the bottom row, sew both of those, and I believe I press up towards the top and down towards the bottom, but we'll see. With our 2 horizontal seams now sewn, our 9-patch is complete, and that gives us one complete Christmas tree block, and it looks like I pressed towards the center and not up and down towards the top and bottom row. So with this one block complete, for the wall hanging, we just need to make another 3 of these, and for the full quilt, you'll need to make another 11, making a total of 12. So for the wall hanging, we make a total of 4, and for the full quilt, we're going to make a total of 12. Alrighty. Hopefully you were able to keep up with everything that we did there throughout that sewing. As I said, you'll need to make a total of 4 of these blocks throughout the tutorial. I only made 1. If you are doing the full quilt, you'll need to make all 12. So join me again next week for the next little section of this, which is just how to put the sashing and the other tree together. Hopefully you've enjoyed what you watched this week. If you have, why don't you like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and when you subscribe, make sure you click that little bell icon so you'll be notified of all my upcoming releases. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.